I'm Andrew Phillips and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can easily fix an air compressor that will not shut off. Let's go ahead and get started. Now the particular air compressor that I'm working on in this video here, this is a Husky 33 gallon. Now depending on the air compressor you have, the process may be a little bit different, but the part that we're going to be talking about, it's called the pressure switch. That particular part is what causes the air compressor to shut off and turn on depending on the pressure buildup inside. So when it reaches its maximum, that pressure switch is going to shut it off, and then when the pressure goes down, it's going to kick it back on to build back up the pressure. When those pressure switches go, that's when you're going to have the problem where the compressor will not stop running, and then that's dangerous because you'll build up too much pressure. A lot of times you'll have a safety valve in there that'll cut it off at that point, but you want to get that fixed, and that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to connect this up to some power. We're going to turn it on, and I'll show you what we're running into where it's just going to keep running. I had to turn this off. You could see on the gauge we were passing the 150 PSI. It was like around 152. This particular compressor should be shutting off at 150 PSI. With that pressure switch being bad, it would keep running, which is dangerous. So that's what we're talking about. Normally that should be shutting off at that point and not continuing beyond that maximum pressure. So let's open this up so we can change that out, and then we'll test it again and see how it looks. And we are done. All the pressure has been released. I'm going to go underneath and we'll close that valve. By the way, if you do have an air compressor and you use it, it's good to drain the air out of it, and so that way moisture does not build up inside of it, because then you can get rust building up and then it can rust out. You can have problems. So usually whenever I use it, once I'm done, I usually go underneath, open the valve, drain it out real good, let all the moisture out of it, and then close it back up. That way it's nice and dry. So let me close that, and then we'll come back up to open this thing up. Valve is closed, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to unplug it. You don't want to be leaving it plugged in now that we're going to be opening it up. You want it free from any connection just to prevent any kind of accidents. Let me get a close-up here as we open up this canister here so we can locate the pressure valve and swap that out. Depending on your air compressor, the housing here may be different as far as how you open it, but once you figure out how to get that open, you're going to be looking here towards the front most of the time. Is what you're going to find is we can look in here. That is our pressure switch on this particular model here, this Husky. But you'll see that located. And if we move the wires out of the way, you'll see that it's connected here. You have two female connections coming into the back of that pressure switch. And you're going to need to remove those so that way we can get clear access to that part. So as we pull these female connections off, see here, work those off. Get them both off. Now we have clear access to the pressure switch, so we can then detach that and replace that accordingly to replace this piece. If you find the hose going to the valve and trace that, you will find your pressure switch in that line right there. If you're having a hard time finding it, easiest way would be to find a manual for your actual compressor so you can pinpoint it exact, but if not, that's usually where you'll find it. Now, once we have this pressure switch removed and detached here, you'll notice that we have a clamp holding it on. These are called ear clamps, and you can see here's one here. This is what it looks like. You have this one, which is a single ear. Some are double ear clamps, but you have that ear, which is what you're going to crimp to tighten it, and you want to make sure that you use those when it's time to replace it. So next thing we need to do is we need to remove it. So what I use is you can take a small screwdriver to pry that off if you don't have the proper tools. And if you pop it off here, you can break it free, and then you can pull it off at that point. Now, they do make specific tools here like this ear hose clamp pliers right here, where you can actually pinch the ear down, and you can break it that way to remove it, which is really the proper way that you want to do it. If not, you can also use wire cutters, as shown here, snippers, and just snip it. Give it a good squeeze. And there you go, you can snap it free as well. But for the sake of this video, I'm just using these small flathead screwdriver, and we'll just pry it open. and then we can break this free, and then once we have it off, we can just slide it here off the hose. This is the pressure switch on this particular compressor. As mentioned already, yours may be different, but that's what you're going to need to replace is your pressure switch. And then when you put the new one in, that'll solve your problem. You want to make sure that when you put the new one in that you use also ear clamps, these hose clamps. You can buy a kit like I have here with different sizes, but you want to make sure that you find a specific size for your hose. This is a 1/2 inch diameter hose that we have here. So we have right here our ear hose clamp, the new one. We're going to slide that on. Get it secured in place before we tighten it. Okay, now that that's on, here's our pressure switch. We'll take our barbed edge, feed that all the way down in, like that. So the next thing that we need to do, you're going to need these ear clamp pliers right here. So that way we can crimp this right here. So this is how the pliers will go around it. You have the ear right there, and the plier, you can see how the point goes around it. That way it can pinch it up in that corner and we can tighten it. So let's go ahead and squeeze it so we can tighten that on, and then that will secure it tightly around the barbed edge. And you want to be using these kind of clamps right here, these ear hose clamps. These are the best ones for air compressors, things like that for the lines. But let's get the camera position here and I'll show you. There we go. And that's pretty tight. Let me get a close up. See how it's tightened right there? Nice and solid. That hose is very snug against that barbed edge. You can see it on this side as well. So now we're ready to attach this back. And this thing is, you can't even turn this. That's how tight that is. And that's what you want. You don't want to be using just regular hose clamps because they're not going to be secure enough for the pressure. Next, you're going to want to reattach any harness or bracket that holds the pressure switch in place. Don't forget to attach the connections on the back of it. So depending on how yours was connected, make sure you reconnect everything. If there's any other wires that you had to disconnect to get access, make sure you secure everything back and make sure everything is tight and in place. And here we go. Make sure it's nice and secure. And let's see, get that clipped on there, and everything looks good. Everything is good. We're ready to seal up the housing. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to close up the housing that you may have taken off. Make sure you check your manual to get it all set, and let's fire it up and test it. Well, there you saw it. This thing cut off as it should when it reached the proper PSI. So just to recap here, if you have an air compressor that will not shut off when it reaches the proper PSI, you want to take a look at your pressure switch. As mentioned already, this one here is a Husky C331H, but any air compressor, you're going to have that switch. That switch there is basically going to let it know when it's met its max, and then when it falls below it, when to kick back on to build it back up. And as we just saw in that example, it shuts off fine, it builds up fine, everything is working good with that. So please send me any questions and comments. I would love to hear from you. I hope that this video was informative for you and helped you out with any issues that you're having with your air compressor not shutting off. As always, I appreciate all the support. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.